All volunteers. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, the world just marked Earth Day, and Canadians understand that climate change is an existential crisis. But our actions have not met our aspirations or the urgency required. We must significantly reduce our fossil fuel usage. A clear majority of Canadians want the oil and gas sector to do its fair share. Oil and gas accounts for just 5% of our economy, yet is responsible for 26% of Canada's emissions. That's more than any other sector.
Oh, where do we even start with this buffoonery? Let's finish it before we get into it.
To meet our targets, Canada must reduce emissions 60% below 2005 levels by 2030.
By 2030.
Done right, this transition will lower household energy costs, create more sustainable jobs, and allow us to reach our climate targets for the first time in history. To do so requires a hard, legislated cap on oil and gas emissions in Canada. I urge this government to hold the oil and gas sector to these necessary and urgent targets. Our planet's health and that of all species living on it depend on it. Yep.
This is the quality of Canadian politics. First of all, this looks like a Monty Python skit. This guy, oh my goodness, this is a Monty Python skit. Let's start from the beginning and just identify the rubbish.
All volunteers. Thank you.
Ending the last question.
The Honourable Member.
First of all, the speaker is very performative.
For Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, the world just marked Earth Day, and Canadians understand that climate change is an existential crisis.
Canadians understand that climate change is an existential crisis. He's telling us what Canadians understand. Why? Because the dog's barking. Because he's going to tell us what Canadians know.
But our actions have not met our aspirations or the urgency required. We must significantly reduce our fossil fuel usage. A clear majority of Canadians want the oil and gas sector to do its fair share.
A clear majority of Canadians want the oil and gas sector to do its fair share. Why? Because the oil and gas sector, it's the number one emitter industry.
Oil and gas accounts for just 5% of our economy, yet is responsible for 26% of Canada's emissions.
That's a wonderful... What else would be responsible for Canada's emissions? Oil and gas, 5% of the economy. What did he say, 26% of the emissions? What else would be accountable for emissions in Canada? Lawyers practicing law, they do emit a lot of hot air, just not the same type of emissions. Does everybody know what percentage of global emissions come from Canada? Let's just assume we agree on the premise. We don't. Let's just agree, for the sake of argument, that global emissions, that carbon emissions, CO2 emissions, whatever one, emissions are the only problem. What percentage of global emissions come from Canada? Take a guess while I let the dog in the room. Hold on. Oh, excuse me. What's the guess? 1.5 of global emissions are Canadian. Claire Robitaille. Ding, 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 ding. We have a winner. It might be between one. It's under 2. There's like it's between 1.8, 1.5. Let me just bring up a little chart. It'll help us understand. It'll help us understand the lies when you hear them, and the buffoonery, the absolute buffoonery of this policy that's being pushed not just in Canada, but in Canada in particular. How do we want to organize the chart, people? Do we want to go by the share of the world's emissions? Let's do that. Oh, I should have asked before. China, 30% of global emissions come from China. But that sounds bad if you want to blame China. But if you want to blame the United States, well, you see what you got to do there then is not go by global emissions, because the United States is number 2 on global emissions. Still bad, but it is it's a big country. It's not quite as big as China because it only has 360 some odd million people compared to China's 2 billion. Compared to India, which actually has the least, not the least, but number 3. So China emits 30% of global emissions, but that's not so bad because per capita. Look at that, per capita, they're better than America. Look at Canada. Per capita, Canada's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Per capita, not only do we emit under 2%, almost 2% global emissions, per capita, we're terrible. I mean, it might have something to do with a sparsely populated country that is massive in landmass, and therefore it might require, transportation of goods, et cetera, et cetera. But if we really want to, say how bad Canada, say how bad the United States is, go per capita. Canada's worse than the United States. Canada is responsible for 1.8% of global emissions. This thing has frozen, damn it. 1.8% of global emissions. 1/4 of our total emissions come from oil and gas. So let's go ahead and cripple Canadian society. Let's go ahead and cripple the Canadian economy by compelling oil and gas to reduce its emissions, because you're going to reduce the 1.8% of global emissions, even if you could wipe it off the map and Canada emits zero. You know what you've done for global emissions? You've reduced them by 1.8%. You know what is going to happen? Nothing. Because China's still going to sit out there polluting, emitting, assuming that's the cause, more than anybody else, pretty much combined. But let's go ahead and cripple Canada so that we can cut 1/4 of our 1.7% of global emissions. And by the way, what's going to end up having to happen? Oh, I don't know. We're just going to have to end up buying oil the same way they've been doing in the state. You'll go to Venezuela, go to Saudi Arabia. Hey, maybe we'll even go to Russia and buy some. Oh, no, we don't do that. We don't support that tire. We'll just go buy it from Venezuela, Saudi Arabia. Oh, mama mia, mamacita. We're being governed by idiots. Idiots, hypocrites, liars, gaslighters. Oh. Anyways, that's it. I wanted to start on something innocuous, something not related to what we're going to talk about today. Oh, Canadian trees reduce far more than 2%. Can you imagine the idea that we emit 1.8% of global emissions, even assuming emissions are the be all and end all of climate change? Let's go cripple the Canadian economy. Let's cripple the Canadian people. Let's put ourselves in a position where we're forced to basically buy from tyrants who pollute for us. It'll make us feel good because we won't pollute here. The electric vehicles, setting aside the fact that, what powers those vehicles in Canada might be hydro dams that are flooding native territory, poisoning natives with mercury poisoning because the fish that live in these flooded lands that leach out all the mercury from the flooded trees, they then in turn get absorbed by the fish, which get eaten by the natives and then pollute and poison them. Forget that. We don't care about that. Let's go outsource all of our pollution to Africa, South America, and then let's get those batteries and let's get all that vehicle stuff over here by freightliners. But let's just paralyze the Canadian oil and gas industry, because it's only 5% of the economy, but represents 26% of emissions, which represent 1.8% of global emissions. It makes sense. We're being governed by idiots. Okay, what do we have on the menu today, people? Before we get into it, standard disclaimers. No medical advice, no election fornication advice, no legal advice, ever. These things right here, what is that, Czechoslovakia? Please have Stéphane Molyneux, a fellow Canadian, for the sidebar. It could be very interesting. In as much as I've heard terrible things about Stéphane Molyneux, I don't think I've heard terrible things come out of him. The degree of the demonization of Stéphane Molyneux, and I don't know all of his content, does not seem to be correlative to the degree of his badness. I remember seeing some stuff which was philosophy once upon a time. Could be interesting. Wouldn't say no, even if he were in fact a bad person. If he's a bad person with bad ideas, give those bad person and bad ideas the sunlight that they deserve, and people will come to their own minds. That is a good segue into, however, the hold on, Q-Fragger. I said I have not heard terrible things. Oh, that's right. I was going to say, geez Louise, I'm getting distracted. Super chats and Rumble rants. We should be simultaneously streaming on Rumble. And I forgot to bring up the screen, so let me see that we are right now. Hold on one second. YouTube has these things called super chats, and Rumble has the equivalent called Rumble rants, or as I like to say, Rumble rants. YouTube takes 30% of all of those tips that you see. So if you want to support me and support what I do, best way to do it, go over to Rumble. They have the thing called Rumble Rants. They ordinarily take 20%, but for the rest of the year, they're taking 0%. 100% goes to the creator. At the end of the year, they'll take back their 20%. But that's good for the creator for this year. It's driving traffic over there, so people are going to get used to Rumble, get used to going to Rumble, get used to Rumble as the actual competitor for YouTube. And then when Rumble goes back to taking their 20%, they will be taking a bigger, they'll be taking a 20% of a bigger pie because they'll have gotten people over there. But it's better to support a platform that supports free speech, better for the creator. And the other thing I was going to say is that we're also simultaneously streaming on vivabarneslaw.locals.com. And we're good. Okay, good. Everything's good there. If you want to go to vivabarneslaw.locals.com, the link is there. You can become a member. You don't have to pay to do that, or you can become one of them paying supporters. If you like what I do with Robert Barnes, $7 a month, $70 a year, or more. Actually, people do pay more than the minimum because they so like what we do and they so want to continue to ensure that we can continue doing what we do without being beholden to the machine and without being stifled by the machine. That machine being YouTube, beholden to advertisers, which we're not, even though I have advertisers. No one's going to tell me what to say, and no one's going to say, could you run us in an episode where you're not talking about transgender stuff, or where you're not talking about Fox News? Or that doesn't happen. And if that does happen, and if it comes with a you have to do this but, then it doesn't come at all. Today, this afternoon, Ray Epps, sweet, merciful goodness. It's crazy. We're living through absolute clown world times. 60 Minutes. It's not just that they're running cover for Ray Epps. You all know what Operation Mockingbird was. I think it was XP? What was his name in the beginning here? Real Hydro XP knows what Operation Mockingbird was. Basically, intelligence infiltrating media, New York Times in particular, to control narrative and to have media act as the mouthpiece, the spokesperson, the press secretary for the military, for intelligence. 60 Minutes, what they're doing with Ray Epps just doesn't make sense. We're going to get to it. Tucker Carlson, he was fired. He was let go yesterday. It's been the rage of the day. I've been listening to everybody to get the best understanding for what's going on. I think I understand it now. I listened to Steven Crowder this morning, watched a highlight from Jimmy Dore, have my own memory as well. I think I understand what's going on. And what else was there? There was one other thing which was fun. Justin Trudeau. Yeah. This morning, I spent all morning going to pull up clips, highlights to illustrate what a disgusting, shameless, remorseless, really, gaslighter Justin Trudeau is. I will not play the entire thing. I think most of you probably have already seen it. I'll just play a little bit of it because I'll give you the link, share it away. May we never forget. And with any luck, may we never have to live through this again, but I'm not sure about that. Look at this here. Hold on a second. Right here. Check this out. Well, I'll only play a minute.
I want to end today by speaking directly to kids once again. I know many of you are in virtual school again. Many of you have made more sacrifices over Christmas, over the holidays, not seeing your friends, not seeing your loved ones. This is not easy. And I know almost half of kids across this country have gotten their vaccine from ages 5 to 12.
And there are people who've probably gotten very sick from vaccinations.
We know there is a risk, a very small risk, 1 in 5,000 that may get myocarditis, for example.
We need to get more. So please ask your parents if you can get vaccinated. Getting vaccinated protects yourself, protects your family, protects your grandparents, protects vulnerable people.
Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market?
Did we know about stopping immunization before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market.
I'm on mute. We really had to move at the speed of science in order to understand what was taking place in the market. That's very interesting. It's interesting how, what the hell is the interplay between the market and science? I'll tell you what it is. Nothing. There is no interplay, except for the fact that the market dictates the science, and they basically admitted it. Oh, did we test for inoculation? No, no. We had to move at the speed of science to really understand what the market was doing. It goes on for another 5 minutes. It's gaslighting, like they're telling you, do not believe your own eyes. They're telling you, I've said it before, I said it a couple times, and it'll be a good segue into one element here. Some people hypothesize that the last straw, or I should say le goutte d'eau qui a fait déborder la vase, the last drop of water that overflowed the vase in French, the straw that broke the camel's back in taking down or breaking apart the Soviet Union was Chernobyl, where you had people dying, radiation poisoning up the wazoo. And you had the government saying, there's no radiation, there's no deformations, there's no death, you're imagining it. You're totally healthy and there's no radiation. And people are like, we're dying, our babies are deformed, and you're telling us it's nothing. Like, we're entering the realm now where Justin Trudeau verbatim said, we're not the type of country that makes vaccinations mandatory. 6 months later, when he runs for office, it says, I believe vaccinations should be mandatory for plane and train travel. We live in a world where they said safe and effective, and then Anthony Housefather 2 months ago comes up and says the pharma companies never really did these kind of tests. Ordinarily it takes years to get to market. They did things totally differently. They rushed things. They rushed production. They weren't willing to put their product on the market without immunization from liability. Oh, but we always told you, we always told you there were risks. Justin Trudeau said there, I'm sure a lot of people got sick from the jibby jab. After 3 years of saying, so safe and effective, go stick it in your 5-year-old. Oh, my goodness. And yeah, go watch it and share it. It's on YouTube, it's on Rumble, it's on Twitter, it's on Instagram. Share it. May the world never forget, and may the world never let Justin Trudeau forget. But we're living in a world, we're being told not to believe our own eyes, but it makes sense because we are living in a world that is ushering in communism. That's not, what's this one? No. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. In the Soviet Union after Chernobyl, they're like, it's nothing, it's fine, it's all in your head. When you get Joe Biden, there was another thing that the Soviets actually did. They thought the Soviets, Marxists, communists had the idea that a parent's love for their child was irrational. And therefore, in a meaningful sense, the state would not have irrational love for the children like the parents would for their own children, but the state would have rational love. And in that sense, the state was more able to raise, educate, or indoctrinate children because of the absence of this sort of irrational love that a parent has for their children. Their communists are right. Marx was right. A parent's love for their child is irrational, and that's what makes them the only person capable of raising that child. Maybe I shouldn't say it like that. I'm sure adoptive parents can also have that love. But growing up, my father always told us there is, in fact, only 2 people on earth that you can always know have your best interest in heart, and even above and beyond your own perceived best interest for yourself, because more often than not, an individual is incapable of objectively viewing what is in their own best interest. That would be your parents. When you have proper parents, they would sacrifice their lives for you. They know you better than you know you because they were witnessing your development before you even knew you were developing. And you can rest assured in the ordinary run of things that your parents are the only ones who truly and unequivocally want what's best for you, more so than even yourself. Then we got to hear Joe Biden say things like this.
Rebecca put a teacher's creed into words when she said, "There's no such thing as someone else's child. No such thing as someone else's child. Our nation's children are all our children." Rebecca put a teacher's creed into words when she said, "There's no such thing as someone else's child. No such thing as someone else's child. Our nation's children are all our children."
Do you get to shower with the nation's children, Joe? And I'll just say that's communism. It is actual verbatim principles of communism. Now, I don't know the full context in which he said that. Maybe he came out immediately afterwards and said, but that's not America. That's not individual responsibility. It's not the state's right or obligation to interfere with parenting rights. I don't know. Maybe he did say that, but he didn't. In a world where, coming out of Quebec, where the state now says, we determine what's in the best interest of the child above and beyond that of the parents, in the case of the Youth Protection Act. In the States, where they're saying, we're going to teach your kids at school stuff that we might not even tell the parents. We're going to engage in indoctrination. There's no other word for it. We might engage with gender ideology with your child and not even tell you, because we're the teachers. You're just the irrational parents who don't know what's best for your children. We're the professionals here. I'm not going to argue with you, Red Milajic, because you might know more about fascism than me. But no, look, it's semantics. Well, we understand. It's fascism. It's communism. It's Marxism. It's totality. Whatever. You know what it is? It's the state. It's the state interfering in and replacing the most intimate aspects of civilian life. It's the state thinking it's your daddy. You know, Justin Trudeau in the montage. Well, I don't think I included that part in the montage where he says, it was my obligation to save as many, to keep Canadians as safe as possible. That the government's obligation is to basically leave us alone and to do that which is essential and the least of it. I made a joke. I didn't make a joke. I made merch. Hold on. Let me bring this up because you know when you do something funny and you know how people are going to respond here. Hold on. Let's just get here. Here we go. Taxation isn't theft. It's armed robbery. I don't know if I made it up. I think I did. At vivafrei.com, you can get some merch, and there's I made a bumper sticker. Taxation isn't theft. It's armed robbery. First of all, it's a joke to some extent, but it's not really a joke to another extent. But what about my roads and my hospitals? You know what? I mean, first of all, go to Quebec. Anybody says my taxation's not that. Go to Quebec, see the potholes, see the infrastructure that's collapsing, despite the fact that they take 50 cents on every dollar and then some. Collapsing infrastructure, potholes on the roads, constant construction. You go to the ER, you'll wait for 8 to 12 hours. And, you know, in Nova Scotia, you'll die in the ER. They had like 586 people die in the ER in 2022 in Nova Scotia. That's a small province. So, what about my essential, structure stuff and hospitals and police? Well, first off, we pay up the wazoo and they don't even do that properly with that which they take. And it's over 50% in Quebec and Canada for those who pay taxes. You figure if you make $100,000 a year, you're paying basically $40,000 in tax. Then you got to pay 15% sales tax on everything you buy. Then if you buy a home, you have your welcome tax, which is basically an FU tax. Oh, up the wazoo. And then what do you get for it? You get crappy services. People in the States, people have this this wild idea of the utopia of universal healthcare in Canada. It's pretty crappy. I don't know that you have Americans fleeing to Canada to try to get into the system there, but what I can tell you that you do have is Canadians fleeing Canada to go to the Mayo Clinic. They come to the States and they pay cash out the wazoo to get treatment that they can't get in Canada. But Joe Biden, your kids aren't your kids, and we're gonna take them. They can come play with the curly hair on my legs. And I'm going to tell them what's good for them. And if you tell your kid who thinks that they want to lop off their genitalia that they can't, well, I'll tell you what. All right. Do we do Tucker Carlson on YouTube or Rumble? Let me see what we got here. So we've got Tucker Carlson, and we've got Ray Epps, and then some other stuff. Okay, let's do Ray Epps on YouTube. We'll start it a bit on YouTube. We're going to do the Adam Kinzinger Shakespearean defense of Ray Epps, and then we're going to go over to Rumble for the rest of it. I don't want to play the 60 Minutes stuff. Let me just get Tabarnouche. Oh, hold on. Where is it? Oh, here we go. Okay. Oh, now okay, we're going to share this. Adam Kinzinger has lost his flippin' mind. I mean, it's fun and it's annoying, and at some point it gets a little tiresome. If 60 Minutes is running cover for Ray Epps, Adam Kinzinger is like the guy in the front. I can't think of an analogy. Remember who Adam Kinzinger is. He was the bipartisan delegate of the January 6th committee, arguably unlawfully formed because it never met the required quorum to do what it was supposed to do. He was allegedly the Republican, the GOP bipartisan element, along with Liz Cheney, of the January 6th committee. The January 6th committee investigated for 2 years before putting out their primetime propaganda montages of video evidence that represented less than 1% of the video footage they had. In fact, segue into Tucker Carlson, one of the reasons that people hypothesized Tucker Carlson got fired from Fox News was because of his January 6th coverage. That was Rupert Murdoch's, allegedly his explanation. Adam Kinzinger was on that committee. That committee did not reveal, did not disclose, did not publish tens of thousands of hours of what we now know was wildly exculpatory video evidence as relates to the QAnon shaman, et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to Ray Epps, Adam Kinzinger's defense of Ray Epps just makes no sense, but it makes total sense, and I'll tell you why in a second. So Adam Kinzinger, these are from a couple of days ago. Why are we defending Ray Epps, who was at January 6th? Because it exposed the lies and sickness of people like Rep. Thomas Massey, Ted Cruz, Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Matt Gaetz. Sunlight disinfects evil. First of all, you have a mixed metaphor there, Kinzinger, but not that I'm one to complain. Why are we defending Ray Epps? First of all, thank you for confirming that you're defending Ray Epps, Kinzinger. For those of you who have forgotten, Ray Epps, you're going to see the video in a second. Ray Epps is the guy on camera the night before telling a group of kids that they have to go into the Capitol. And when he tells the group of kids that they need to go into the Capitol, they immediately spontaneously begin chanting, "Fed, Fed, Fed," because only someone who is clearly mentally unhinged or a Fed would be telling people to go basically go into the Capitol. It was so obvious that the crowd started chanting it spontaneously. He's the guy that's on camera the day of entering restricted areas, breaking the law, trespassing. He's the guy who, in his own text messages to his son, confirmed that he orchestrated the whole thing. He might have been taking a little bit too much credit. He confirmed that he had a hand in orchestrating the events of January 6th. He was the guy that was on the FBI's most wanted list for a day, a week, I forget which, and then magically disappeared from the FBI's most wanted list. He's the only guy on camera committing a crime, admitted to committing a crime. Everybody knows he committed the crime, who did not get convicted. He didn't even get charged. He's the only guy that Adam Kinzinger is defending. Why is Adam Kinzinger defending Ray Epps? Because it exposed the lies and sickness. That makes no sense, but it doesn't matter. Okay, let's close that one down. What else did he say that he? Look at this! Look at this gem, Adam Kinzinger, the bipartisan element of the January 6th committee. People like Tucker Carlson. This was before Tucker Carlson got fired. Rep. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Rep. Massey, and Ted Cruz owe Ray Epps an apology and, quite honestly, some money for destroying his life. And quite honestly, some money. Like we look at, Adam Kinzinger replying to Thomas Massey. Massey said, Ray Epps is the only person I've seen on video January 5th and January 6th urging and directing people to go into the Capitol. In a text message on January 6th, he bragged that he orchestrated it. Why do Democrats and the media portray him as a victim? So bizarre. To which Adam Kinzinger, because he's a very smart man, says, I hope he sues you. You have ruined a man's life who trusted you. You're a sick man. What the flip is going on in Adam Kinzinger's head? First of all, Kinzinger, let me just make sure, is this the last one? And then we just get him retweeting some other stuff. First of all, Kinzinger, I hope he sues you. Sues you for what? Ray Epps is the only person he's seen on January 5th and January 6th urging and directing people to go into the Capitol. That's true. In a text message on January 6th, he bragged that he orchestrated it. That's true. What could he get sued for, Kinzinger? Do tell. You know what the ultimate defense to any claim for defamation is? Truth. Truth is the absolute defense, except in Quebec, actually. Some of you may already know this if you've been around the channel for long enough. In Quebec, something can be defamatory even if it's true, if it's told with the intent to damage someone's reputation. Go figure. This was from a Supreme Court decision involving a notary. I forget the details. The court came to the conclusion that although the contents of the letter were accurate, the contents of the publication were accurate, it was done in such a way to damage the reputation of the individual. Therefore, Quebec is a unique province. It always has been. They're very proud of it. So elsewhere in the rest of Canada and the United States, truth is the absolute defense. And what Rep. Massey said is 1000% true. But this is the most bizarre part of it. Can I highlight? No, I can't. You have ruined a man's life who trusted you. Let's appreciate what he just said there. Kinzinger is accusing or is suggesting that Ray Epps trusted Thomas Massey. Why on earth would Kinzinger assume that Ray Epps trusted another politician? What's the principle, people? Confession through projection. Accuse your enemies of doing what you are doing so as to create confusion. What do I take away from that? And this is my personal opinion. I do not know if it's true or not true, but I strongly suspect, operating on the basis of the time-tested and true principle of projection, the reason why Adam Kinzinger assumes that Ray Epps trusts or accuses him of trusting Massey is because he knows that Ray Epps, or thinks that Ray Epps trusts him, because I suspect, it's not a wild guess, I suspect the committee made certain assurances, promised certain things to Ray Epps. I don't know, in exchange for what? Who knows? Maybe it was in exchange for him being there in the first place. Hey, Ray Epps, go in there and stir up some shit, and we promise you'll never get arrested. Trust us. Go in there, stir up the crowd so we can use it against Donald Trump for a second impeachment. We will protect you. Trust us. The accusation that Ray Epps would trust anybody in politics, other than being outlandish in that politicians are just untrustworthy, with the exception of Maxime Bernier. That's my personal bias or favorite. Take it or leave it. Maxime Bernier, the PPC. The idea that any citizen would trust a member of government, a politician, I mean, that's delusional on its face. But I genuinely believe, in my humble opinion, warranties and assurances were given to Ray Epps. And that is the reason for which Kinzinger is attributing trust as an underlying motive to Ray Epps. All right, well, that's Kinzinger's part in all of this. Now, what we're going to do, we got two Rumble rants. Hold on a second. Let me do this here. First of all, hit the plus button on Rumble, because apparently that does boost the stream in the algorithm, and we can get onto the cover page. I love getting onto the cover page. Hold on, let me just go to that here. So what we're going to do this, I'm going to give you the link to Rumble, and we're going to go there now. Hit the thumbs up thingy thing. Let me see what we're at. It's a plus button on Rumble. Okay, we're at 369 thumbs up for 4,200 viewers. That's good. All right. Before we go over to Rumble, I'm going to read these two Rumble rants. Rumble rants. Stop moving camera. Let's go here. Let's go here. And let's see what these are. Boom shakalaka tatones. If Cryan Adams' argument was true, that Ray Epps was just a standard MAGA terrorist being falsely accused by other MAGA terrorists, would he be happy they're eating their own? None of it makes sense. But the only reason it makes sense is because they're defending one of their own, and they're doing it. This is my underlying theory. They're doing it in such an outrageous, in-your-face, that's not radiation, Chernobyl-like manner. They're doing it that way to enrage people, to draw the ire of people on Ray Epps again. Because if 60 Minutes had just left Ray Epps alone, it's not that the story would die off, but the fervor would certainly not be what it is today. But for 60 Minutes, coming here and telling us that Ray Epps is an innocent bystander, he only wanted to make the peace, and we're going to get to it. But for 60 Minutes stirring the pot again, I don't think people would be talking about Ray Epps right now. But exact same thing with Brandy Zadrozny's Tiffany Dover is Dead miniseries. But for the fact that NBC kept on talking about Tiffany Dover a year and a half, 2 years later, no one would have been talking about it. Certainly not to the extent that they are now. They revived the conspiracy theory so they can then go make fun of the people who are talking about the conspiracy theory. They revive the conspiracy theory so they can get those who were involved in it in the first place, or, a new batch of people to go bother the individual so they can then say, look at this rabble are going and harassing this innocent victim of a conspiracy theory with Tiffany Dover and with Ray Epps now. 60 Minutes is deliberately stirring the pot. There's no question about it. They're deliberately selling an unbelievable story to the general public, knowing the outrage that it's going to cause because they want it to cause that outrage. Furby Slayer, 40-plus agents infiltrating the Proud Boys. A number of agents, quote, working the crowd, end quote, that they refused to disclose. It was all a Fed operative. And Daddy Crab says, I like your shirt, Viva. You can get this at vivafrei.com as well. My prediction in December 2022 that the conspiracy theory to be confirmed in 2023 was that January 6th was an inside job. And not an inside job. Like, it sounds so crazy, but it's 1,000% true. It was an orchestrated event. It was an instigated event, and then it was what's the word I'm looking for? Not a weaponized, but a politically exploited event. It's not just that they had FBI and intelligence infiltrating the Proud Boys by those proceedings. It's confirmed now. They had intelligence, FBI, whomever, informants having infiltrated the Proud Boys. I mean, it's how they got their convictions for seditious conspiracy, because they had infiltrated the alleged plot of seditious conspiracy in advance. They did the same thing with the Oath Keepers. Intelligence had infiltrated this seditious conspiracy plot, and yet somehow nobody knew what was going to happen on January 6th. Yet somehow they say, we were so unprepared. We didn't know what was going to happen. We had not enough cops because of COVID. We turned down the National Guard because we didn't want it. We didn't think we needed it. We had bike racks. Who could have ever known? Let's be honest. It was weaponized too, for sure. I think it was absolutely not facilitated by not having enough police officers, knowing damn well that intelligence and informants were involved with, I would say even entrapping, but involved with the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. They knew it was coming. They were deliberately understaffed. They were deliberately antagonizing the mob, deliberately firing pepper spray, whatever, into the crowd. And then it wasn't even as bad as they needed it to be. So they lied about deaths resulting from the mob, Brian Sicknick. They lied about deaths that occurred the day of. They said, some people there were 5 deaths that day. One of which was at the hands of the cops, objectively, Ashley Babbitt. Roseanne Boyland, arguably also at the hands of the cops, because there is a theory that she was either struck or stampeded. There were 3 deaths which were medical emergencies. When you have hundreds of thousands of people, things happen. They tried to attribute police officers' deaths to it, suicides in the wake of it. Oh, but they didn't know. They didn't know what was possibly going to go on. They didn't know what was possibly going to happen. Agent provocateur. And now we know that they had people on the ground. Agent provocateur, and they won't tell us how many. Okay. Head on over to Rumble, people. There are 1,597 people on YouTube. Let's do it. Rumble, and then afterwards we're going to have the après stream party at viverbeurslocals.com. Okay. Maureen Brown. Hold on, let me see this here. I was watching Bannon's show on that day. I knew in my gut what was going on then. Once you see truth, it's near impossible to not see it all the time. We remember Barnes and I went live that day. Barnes and I went live that evening. He was in DC, but not at the Capitol. And Jones was there, and he said, "Don't go to the Capitol. It's a setup." Dude, it was the writing was on the wall for those who have seen it before. Like Jones says, hey, they use the same tactics over and over again. Okay, hold on 1 second. Let me just freeze this camera. Insta. Let me go to the app. Okay, hold on. Let me get it here. Okay, and then stop moving. Okay, there we go. Good. I'm still getting emails from Project Veritas, and I don't want them. Hold on, what was this? Can I see this? Yeah. By allowing January 6th to happen, it allows the government knows there was no real threat. Well, by allowing January 6th to happen, it allows for the same type of post 9/11 investigations into domestic terrorists and domestic threats, and it gives the government all the power in the world to do whatever it wants. Okay, go over to Rumble. Ending on YouTube in 3,